Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Code Orange, Underneath. I initially got on the hype train for these guys back in 2017 with the release of their album Forever, a project that I felt like was a really great record to come out of that year. I really enjoyed the group's sound on that thing, the mixture of metalcore, industrial music, a little bit of alternative metal, and even some other kinds of alternative rock making their way into the mix as well. It was just a really unique blend of sounds that the group had, and I felt like no one else out there really had it quite like these guys did on that project. So I was really looking forward to see what they were going to do going forwards after that release. And here now in 2020, we have the next full-length project from these guys. And overall, I feel like this is a really great follow-up to Forever. In fact, I think while these two albums are very similar in terms of their quality, I would go as far as to say that this project is slightly better than Forever was. Again, not by much, but yeah, I think this is another great release from these guys either way, and I'm really happy with how this record turned out. Once again, you have a mixture of really interesting sounds here on this project. You have the metalcore, you have the industrial elements mixed into here as well. You have some tracks on this thing that once again go for a more alternative metal sound or just a variety of other ideas too. The group still keeps a lot of these same genre experiments that they've played around with on previous releases. However, here on this newest release, I feel like the group is pushing these experiments even further, trying out some newer, weirder ideas with them, and just making some really interesting songs as a result of this. Of course, you do still have some cuts on this project that are very straightforward and very aggressive and very true to the band's core sound, but on the whole, I would say that this project here is the most out there and weird that the band has put out so far. The album kicks off some of the more straightforward, aggressive songs on this thing, with the exception of the opening track, which is just more of this intro, not really a full song. A lot of the songs that immediately follow that track, like I said before, are really aggressive, really straightforward, but they maintain a lot about what I really like in Code Orange's music. These tracks, while aggressive, they're very glitchy. They have this tendency to really get started, get you invested, before coming to a sudden halt, before picking up again instantly. It just has this very jarring, noisy, chaotic feel to it that I really like. Songs like Swallowing the Rabbit Hole and In Fear that come towards the start of this thing are just really aggressive, in-your-face tracks that, really have everything I love about this group packed into them in a really concise manner. Overall, just some really great songs. Eventually, after this initial run of tracks on the record, you begin to get some songs on this thing that are a bit different in terms of what genres and sounds they wish to explore. Starting with the song Who I Am, which is a really great song, I should say, by the way. I really like a lot of the glitchy industrial sounds at the start of this thing before it launches into this more industrial kind of alternative metal track. After this point on the record, though, there's a lot more songs like this one where you'll see the band exploring some alternative metal sounds or industrial rock sounds or just something else weird and out of the band's comfort zone. One of the most interesting songs on this record comes in the form of the track Sulfur Surrounding, which kicks off with this guitar part that sounds almost southern rock in nature, I guess was kind of the feel I got from it. Certainly something I didn't expect to hear coming from Code Orange, but the group does a great job of taking it and combining it into their own unique sound in a way that just ends up making one of the most unique tracks on this entire record. I should also say that the hook on this track is also really memorable and catchy as well, and that's something I can honestly say for a good amount of the tracks on this record that feature some clean singing. When the band isn't really beating you over the head with a lot of aggression, they're giving you some tracks with some pretty memorable hooks to them that I ended up really enjoying. As you progress further into the track listing, songs like The Easy Way and Autumn and Carbine and A Sliver, for example, are songs that also feature some memorable hooks to them and also see the band playing around with some more interesting, unique ideas, mixing together elements of alternative metal, industrial music, as well as, the metalcore that the band is known for at times as well, especially with some of the riffs that pop up on some of these songs. The closing track of this record, the title track, is probably the most interesting song on the record, though, I should say, because this is a track that sees the group taking a lot of what they've experimented with on this project before and just kind of combining it all into one concise package of a song, because this track sees the group having those aggressive vocals, the clean vocals. You have some really aggressive playing here on this thing. You have some calmer moments on this track as well. It really just feels like the band is taking everything that they've done before and done well before and just putting it into one song pretty much. But it doesn't feel like a mess of a bunch of different ideas too, I should say. It still feels like a really well planned out track. There's a clear structure to it that I also think just lends itself to being really interesting and engaging while listening to it. Overall, the title track of this thing just perfectly embodies the overall sound and aesthetic and vibe that this record has been going for in every track preceding it. And I think it's just a fantastic way to end off the record as a result of that. One other thing that I really love about this project is the flow of this record. All the tracks on this thing just flow together really nicely, but in a kind of unconventional way, I should say. Mostly because it's not necessarily that a lot of these tracks, blend together in a traditional sense of the word. It's more so that just because of the really glitchy and start and stop nature of a lot of these songs, whenever a new track starts here on this record, it never feels all that out of place, even if the song, starts going in a really different direction really quickly compared to the previous track. It always just feels like the album is just kind of glitching out and starting off with something new instead of maybe just continuing on with the same track that I've been playing before. It's a really unique kind of cohesion, but it's one that makes perfect sense in the context of this record, given the sound that the group is going for here on this thing, and it just makes listening to this thing as a whole just really interesting and great, and just makes it feel a lot smoother in a kind of jagged way, if that makes any sense. I assure you, it makes perfect sense when you actually listen to the record. Explaining it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but it makes perfect sense when you listen to it, just given the glitchy industrial sounds that Code Orange is playing with here. When it comes to complaints that I have with this record, I don't really have many. I will say that some of the more aggressive tracks that come later on in the track list maybe don't feel quite as essential to the overall experience of this record as some of the more aggressive tracks at the start of the record do, or some of the more experimental tracks later on do on this thing. That's not to say that they're bad songs overall. In fact, I still think at the very least that even the worst tracks on this album are still really good. But I just think some of the more aggressive tracks that come later on, like Back Inside the Glass or Erasure Scan, for example, while enjoyable tracks, they don't exactly bring a ton new to this project that wasn't already done before with some other tracks on this album that came earlier in the track listing. They're fine songs. They do help break up the pace of the record from some of the more experimental bits on this thing, but overall, I don't think that they're the most essential thing on this project, and cutting them out could have also made this record just a bit more concise overall, but again, that's not a very major complaint that I have with this project. The opening track to this record, the intro to this thing, Deeper Than Before, is also a moment on this record that I don't feel like is entirely essential to this album's entire feel and flow. It's a decent opener, it doesn't sound bad or anything like that, it's just kind of there for the most part. I don't think it necessarily adds a ton to this thing, and it's another moment on the record I feel like could have been done without, but at the same time, I don't really feel all that bothered by the fact that it's there. Overall, Underneath is just a really solid record from Code Orange and a nice follow-up to 2017's Forever. I feel like the group took what made that record really interesting and just expanded on it even more, as this project, like I said before, it maintains a lot of that album's strengths, it keeps a lot of the genre experimentation that was on that thing as well, keeps a lot of the mix of experimentation and just straightforward aggression, but it just expands on it in a way that makes this record even more fulfilling to listen to. Overall, Underneath as a whole encompasses a lot of what I really like about this band, just compacted into one album. Even though there are some tracks on here that I feel like maybe aren't quite as essential to this thing as a whole, none of the songs on this thing are bad at the end of the day. And if you're a fan of this kind of music and you like the band's previous work, I think you're going to enjoy this record as well. It's certainly worth listening to. Overall, Underneath, a pretty great album, definitely one that I'm going to be returning to in the future. Give this thing a listen if you haven't done so already, but that's just my own thoughts on this project. If you happen to disagree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your own thoughts on this album in the comments section down below, and while you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content, things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. Again, thank you guys for watching this video, and stay golden.